Hello students, I'm sure you are all keeping well and safe at home. This is Sir Paulie once again from the Department of Political Science. Well, in the last chapter, we have learned about the meaning of politics and the meaning of political science. We also have learned what do we study in political theory and the importance of studying political theory. Well, today we are going to learn another chapter, and that is chapter 2, and the name of the chapter is freedom. So we are going to learn about a very important topic from the political theory, freedom. Well, my dear boys and girls, freedom is one of the most important fundamental rights which is wanted by everyone in this world. Whether you, me, anyone in this world want this particular right known as freedom. None of us want to be under anyone. We all want to do what we want to do. We want to express freely what we want. We don't want to be guided. We don't want to be under the domination of anyone. So many wars have been fought for this particular right called freedom. So many people have sacrificed their life. Even today, in many parts of the world, people are still struggling for this particular term called freedom. Well, my dear boys and girls, get ready. Today we are going to learn what exactly this particular term freedom means. Before we understand what actually the freedom means, we will start with two great leaders who have sacrificed and fought for what we call freedom. The first leader that we are going to learn is Nelson Mandela. I'm sure most of you might have heard about this particular person. He was a great leader. He is from South Africa and he fought for the freedom of the people of South Africa. You know very well, South Africa was a colony of the British, and the British considered themselves as superior. They followed the policy of white man's policy. They thought that the white race is superior than the black race, and they dominated the blacks in South Africa. The blacks were not given the right to vote. They were not even allowed to go to the schools. They were not allowed to live along with the white people. You know, they were humiliated in their own land. They were the people of the original people of South Africa. Yet, somebody came from outside, the foreigners, they started to rule over them. The people of South Africa, the black people, had no freedom. And this particular leader, Nelson Mandela, fought for the freedom of these people of South Africa. And this racist policy followed by the British in South Africa is known as the apartheid regime. Apartheid regime is the segregationist policy followed by the British in South Africa, where the white dominated the black. They discriminated the black. They did not allow the black to live as human beings in South Africa. This policy was called apartheid regime, and Nelson Mandela fought against this. Nelson Mandela had to pay heavy for this. He was put in the jail for 28 years in the dark room. When he was in the jail for 28 years, he wrote a very famous book, his own autobiography, known as Long Walk to Freedom. Long Walk to Freedom. This is the autobiography of Nelson Mandela, which he wrote when he was in the jail. In this book, he explains about his struggle against the apartheid regime, the segregationist policy of the British in South Africa. Thank God, after many years, South Africa got freedom. Today, the black and the white are living happily together as one. The black enjoys the same rights as the whites. That is one leader who fought for the freedom, and he attained the freedom for the people of South Africa. Well, we shall go to the next leader. Another leader that we are going to learn is Aung San Suu Kyi. She is from Myanmar, one of India's neighboring country, which we call it Burma. Myanmar is again another story. It got freedom, but the problem in Myanmar is that it is under the domination of military. Military is having the absolute power in Myanmar. People are not able to form their own political party. They have no political rights. They cannot criticize the government. They cannot form their own political party. They have no elections. And whatever the military says, the people have to follow. And the people have a tough time in Myanmar. And this particular lady, Aung San Suu Kyi, is fighting for this freedom in Myanmar. She is fighting against the military domination of Myanmar. According to her, freedom means freedom from fear. You know, in Myanmar, the people are not having the real freedom. They are always under the fear of the military. They are not able to express their feelings. They are not able to say if the government is doing something wrong. They are not able to express like that we do in India. And Aung San Suu Kyi is fighting for this freedom, freedom from fear. This is the name of the book written by her, Freedom from Fear. Well, my dear boys and girls, we have seen two great leaders. One, Nelson Mandela, fighting for freedom for the people of South Africa against the apartheid regime of British. Another leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, fighting for again freedom from the military domination in Myanmar. Now we shall try to understand what actually the meaning of freedom. You and me, we all like to have freedom. We don't want to be controlled by our teachers. We don't want to be controlled by our parents. We don't want to be controlled by our elders. We all want to do everything what we like. Is that the meaning of freedom? Well, today I'm going to explain to you what exactly the meaning of freedom. Well, if you look in the dictionary, freedom means absence of constraints. Constraints. Constraints means restrictions. Restrictions. For example, you know, in the school, so many restrictions are there. For example, you have to come to the school in time. If you are late, you will be punished. So that is a restriction. You have to wear the school uniform and come to the school. You cannot wear as you like. That is a restriction. You have to get a pass mark in the exams, otherwise you will not be promoted to the next class. That is a restriction. In your house, maybe mom and dad will tell you, you have to come to the house before 7 o'clock night. That is a restriction. You cannot roam around in the town. All these restrictions are called what? Constraints. And freedom means absence of constraints. When there are no restrictions in our life, when you and me are able to do whatever we want according to our wish, we say we have got freedom. Well, I'm sure you like this meaning of freedom. But if you and me are given the full freedom to do whatever we want to do you think that we will be able to live in the society? That is a big question mark. If full freedom is given to you and me, then what will happen? The world will be changed into a jungle. Do you know? There is a law in the jungle. You know, the jungle, the forest, where animals are there, there is also a law. And you know what is the law of the jungle? The law of the jungle is the might is right. The might. One who is having lot of muscle power, one who is having great strength, he is always right. That's why the lion tell the deer, hey you deer, tomorrow you'll be my breakfast. And the poor deer cannot say anything. The deer will go tomorrow morning and say in front of the lion, yes my lord, I am here, you have your breakfast. Why? The lion is the might. The lion is having the power. He is more powerful than the deer. And nobody is there to help the deer. Whoever is strong, who is having muscle power, who is having money power, he is right. This is called the might is right. That is the law of the jungle. But we are human beings. We cannot just live like the people, animals in the jungle. The weak, the poor, the ordinary people also should live. Not only the rich and the muscle men. Everyone should have the freedom to live. And so, there should be some constraints. There should be some restrictions in our life. You and me cannot be just left to do anything that we like. Then what is freedom? And here I am going to give you, my dear boys and girls, the real meaning of freedom. The real meaning of freedom is not that with the freedom is given to us to do whatever we want. That is not the meaning of freedom actually. Then what is actually the meaning of freedom? Freedom means an atmosphere where you and me can develop our talents. You know, God has given everyone certain talents. There are certain hidden talents in us. And we all wanted to develop that. And when you and me are having the enough atmosphere to develop our talents and to become a full-fledged human beings, then I say, I have freedom, you have freedom. When everyone in the society have the opportunity to develop himself or herself, then we say there is freedom. It is not, freedom doesn't mean that I can drink and dance whatever I want. I can eat whatever I want. I can go and fight with anyone. That is not the freedom. Freedom means an atmosphere to develop ourselves. For example, I want to study. You want to study. So why? That is your right. You want to develop yourself. And what should be there? There should be good school. There should be good teachers. And when I get the opportunity to go to the school and study and develop myself, then I say, I have the freedom. You want to play football, right? You like football. So you wanted to develop yourself as a footballer. So what is the freedom for you? There should be good ground, there should be good coaches, and you go and learn yourself and you become a good footballer. Yes, you have good freedom. Not that you wanted to go, you want to have freedom to drink and fight. No, not that. Freedom refers to an atmosphere where everyone can develop themselves and become a full-fledged human beings, not to destroy ourselves. Am I clear? So that is actually the meaning of freedom. So freedom in the dictionary means absence of constraints. But in reality, freedom refers to an atmosphere where every individual can develop himself or herself and become a full-fledged human beings. And this video's last topic is negative and positive freedom. First one is negative freedom. Negative freedom refers to absence of constraints. When there are no restrictions, when there are no constraints, when everybody can do whatever they want, that freedom is called negative freedom. And this is not good. That's why it is called negative freedom. What is positive freedom? Positive freedom is the opposite of that. An atmosphere where everyone can develop himself or herself and become a full-fledged human beings. That is called positive freedom. Well, my dear boys, I'm going to wind up. Before wind up this video, I would like to recap what we have learned today. We are in chapter 2 The name of the chapter is Freedom. We have learned two leaders who fought for freedom. One is Nelson Mandela in South Africa, who fought against the apartheid regime of the segregationist policy of British, and finally they got freedom. Next we learned about Aung San Suu Kyi. She is a freedom fighter in Myanmar, fighting against the domination of army in Myanmar. And then we learned the meaning of freedom. Freedom refers to an atmosphere where everyone can develop himself or herself into full-fledged human beings. And lastly, the negative and positive freedom. Negative freedom refers to absolute absence of constraints, where the individual can do whatever he or she wants. That is not good, that's why it is called negative. Positive freedom refers to an atmosphere where we can develop ourselves into full-fledged human beings. I'll come up with another video where we'll be learning more about this chapter, freedom. Well, students, so far we have learned the meaning of freedom and the leaders who fought for getting freedom. So we have learned that freedom refers to an atmosphere where every individual can develop himself or herself into full-fledged human beings. Now we shall learn another topic, and the topic is sources of constraints. Sources of constraints. I have already told you the meaning of constraints. Constraints means restrictions or limitations in our lives. I gave the examples of restrictions, like for example, in the schools we have to follow some rules and regulations. At home, parents give you some rules and regulations. They are called restrictions or constraints. What are the sources of constraints? The first source of constraint is domination and external control. External means somebody from outside is controlling us and dominating us. Then we will have constraints. For example, in South Africa, people were having some constraints, some restrictions. Why? Because the British were dominating them. Or somebody from outside controlling you. For example, it may be government. Government has got some rules and regulations that do not allow us to do whatever we want. So it gives us some restrictions. In the school, some rules and regulations are there that do not allow us to do whatever we want. And these are all external controls. And this is one source of constraints. And when there are constraints, we will not be able to enjoy freedom. I told you, actually, in the dictionary, freedom means absence of constraints. When there are no constraints, then we can enjoy freedom. And this is one source of constraints, domination and external control. The second source of constraints, source means from where we get these constraints. Second source, social inequality. In the society, we sometimes come across inequalities. And because of these inequalities, we get some constraints or some restrictions in our life. For example, in the Indian society, especially the Hindu society, there was the caste system. The upper caste, the middle caste, and the lower caste. The upper caste and the middle caste enjoyed a lot of privileges. Whereas the lower caste, just because they belong to the lower caste, they had many restrictions. They were not allowed to live along with the upper caste. They were not allowed to take the water from the common well. They were not even allowed to enter the temple for worship. A lot of restrictions were there. And these restrictions were not allowing them to enjoy the freedom. So social inequality also can be a source of constraints. So these are the two sources of constraints, Sources means from where the constraints come. So one, domination and external control. Second one, social inequality. We go to the next topic. I already explained previously, but once more, why do we need these constraints? Do we need constraints in our life? I already given you examples of that. We may think that there should not be any constraints, no restrictions. We should be allowed to do whatever we want to do in our life. Then what will happen? There will be full of chaos and confusions. And the society will be turned into a jungle where neither you, me, anyone will be able to enjoy life. And what will happen? The law of the jungle will prevail. The law of the jungle is what? The might is right. Who is having the muscle power? Who is having the wealth? They will only enjoy the freedom. The weaker, the ordinary, the poor will never be able to enjoy any freedom. That is why we have to have some constraints. Some restrictions should be there. But the restrictions should be reasonable. Reasonable restrictions. If lots of restrictions, which is not allowing to enjoy any freedom, then that is not good. There should be some reasonable restrictions. Otherwise, they will be full of chaos and no one will be able to enjoy our freedom. We will not be able to enjoy, we will not be able to develop ourselves into a full-fledged human beings. We will be suppressed. We will not be able to grow if there are no constraints at all. Fine. And the last topic for today, and in this chapter, is the harm principle. H-A-R-M, harm principle. It is one of the most important principles regarding the freedom. This principle was or is propagated by a very famous philosopher by the name John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill. He is the person who propagated this principle known as harm principle. So get ready. I'm going to explain to you what is this harm principle. According to John Stuart Mill, all the actions of human beings can be divided into two types. Means whatever actions that me and you, we are all doing, it can be divided into two types. The first one is called self-regarding action. Self-regarding action. Self-regarding actions are those actions that we do which will affect only the doer. It will not affect others. For example, I take poison. Then that taking of poison is an action. And that action will affect only me, not you or anybody else. So that kind of action can be known as what? Self-regarding action. That action is not affecting anybody else, it is only affecting me. So if an action is affecting only the doer, then that kind of actions are called what? Self-regarding actions. Second one is called other regarding action. Other regarding action. Other regarding actions are those actions which will affect not only the doer but also others. For example, when a teacher is taking class, one boy sings songs and shouts and make noise. That is an action. And that action is affecting not only him, it affects other students as well. So that can be known as what? An other regarding action. So once more, according to John Stuart Mill, all the actions of an individual can be divided into two categories. Self-regarding action, that actions which affect only the doer, and other regarding actions, the actions that affect not only the doer but others as well. Now what is the harm principle? According to harm principle, Mill says that there should not be any restrictions on self-regarding actions. According to Harm principle, there should not be any restrictions on self-regarding actions. Let the people do whatever they want. If that action is affecting that individual only, there should not be any restrictions. But there should be reasonable restrictions on other regarding actions. If an individual's action is going to affect others, then there should be some reasonable restrictions on that action. This is called the Harm principle given by John Stuart Mill. Well, my dear boys and girls, that's all about this chapter, chapter 2. Before I wind up this chapter, let me recap and rewind what we have learned. We have learned first one, the sources of constraints. From where the constraints come. There are two sources. One is domination and external control. Somebody from outside controls and dominates you. And that is one source of constraints. Second one, social inequality. Due to inequality in the society, there can be some constraints in our life. Second point we learned, why do we need constraints? Constraints are necessary. If there are no constraints in our life, each one will be doing whatever he or she wants, and there will be full of chaos and confusions, and no one will be able to enjoy any rights. So there should be some reasonable restrictions or constraints in our life. Otherwise, the society will be turned into a jungle where only the might will be right. The poor, the weak, and the ordinary will never be able to enjoy any freedom. And the third topic we learn, the Harm principle. It's a principle dealing with the freedom. It is given by a very famous philosopher by the name John Stuart Mill. According to him, all the actions of an individual can be divided into two. One, self-regarding action, the actions that will affect only the doer. And the second, other regarding actions, the actions that affect not only the doer, even others. And according to Harm principle, there should not be any restrictions on self-regarding actions, but there should be some reasonable restrictions on other regarding actions. Well, my dear boys, I'm sure you have understood this chapter very well. Stay home, stay safe. Till then, take care.